Hi, everyone, and welcome to lesson 4 of our free beginner astrology course. Today, we are going to be learning about aspects. By now, we've learned about the planets, the zodiac signs, and the houses. Okay, so you've learned about the main characters, the planets, their styles, the signs, the scenes and the settings that everything's going down in, the houses. You also learned about the angles, right? The major pillars or our camera lens of the story. Now, with aspects, this is the relationship between the characters. This is how the planets are communicating with each other. So, aspects tell you the interactions, right? Are people working well together? Are the planets, constantly challenging one another? Are the planets supporting each other? Or is there tension and they need to learn how to cooperate? We can see that by looking at the aspects. This is where astrology becomes incredibly personal. And this is where it becomes a mirror of your psyche. You guys know I'm a shadow work. I do a little bit of everything, but I love shadow work astrology. I love psychology astrology. Aspects are a major thing to understand and study if you want to understand what is the conversations going on in your psyche. That's essentially what this is. An aspect is simply just the angle formed between two planets. Okay. So these lines, that is showing the angle between Pluto, for example, and Saturn. Okay. So that's what that is. And depending on the angle, the planet will create a unique relationship. Some angles create conversations that feel easy. Some angles might create friction. Some angles might inspire growth, some might inspire challenge, and you'll learn about that as we get into the 5 major aspects. Now, I want to touch on a big misconception when it comes to reading aspects, and that is that some aspects are good while others are bad. And that is simply not true. Okay, now some aspects are easier and some aspects are harder. Easy aspects tend to allow energy to flow naturally, whereas hard aspects might create friction. But that's not necessarily a good or bad thing. Friction does not mean bad. Something flowing naturally does not mean good. Right? For example, think about two sticks rubbing against each other to create fire. That is friction. That's friction for something good. Without resistance, we don't get the fire. Without resistance, sometimes nothing changes. Without challenge, we might not grow. Whereas let's think of like a flowing energy. What if there's two people together? They kind of have this dynamic of a trine where when they get together, things just flow. But what if they are triggering each other's shadow sides, and that's what's flowing easily. They are, trauma bonding and getting into a lot of trouble together, and that's like what's flowing easily, right? Like for something to be easy and for something to have friction does not equate to good or bad aspects. As I said in earlier classes, try to get good and bad out of your vocabulary when it comes to reading charts. People are complex. Charts are complex. Let's talk about the purpose then of aspects, right? And it's to integrate. It's about integration. This isn't to label yourself as like, oh, well, this part of me, my Venus sign, is constantly getting challenged by this part of me, my Saturn energy. That's bad. And this is a weak part of my chart. No, that's not what this is about. This is about an integration. This is like saying, okay, well, this Venus energy of mine might be squaring my Saturn energy. How can I make them work together? How can I appease them? How can I kind of take the friction down a little bit? How can we integrate what both of these planets want so they don't go at each other? That's the main thing when we're looking at hard aspects. How do we integrate what the planets involved want so that way they don't come after each other? Because at the end of the day, energy just needs to be represented. And what's beautiful about you being the conductor of your life is that you can direct your energy. This may be your birth chart. These are your default settings. You can't ever change up these settings, but you can change how you interact with them. You don't have to just be stuck in them. It's dynamic. Things are moving parts that we could play with and interact with. It's alive. And when there's friction between two planets, sometimes it just means like, one part of you wants safety while the other part of you wants adventure. One part of you wants connection, but the other part of you feels vulnerability. Astrology can help us understand those inner conflicts so we stop fighting ourselves. And you're not here to like eliminate one aspect. You're here to like help it work together. You're here to use it to understand yourself deeper. Okay, well, we know that a part of me is fearing vulnerability. This might be my eighth house Saturn. Let's learn about it. Let's address it. Let's heal the parts of me that feel vulnerable. And then you will find that that Saturn energy in the eighth house will manifest in a different way. Maybe instead of fear of vulnerability, Saturn eighth house, it becomes building assets. So that's also Saturn in eighth house energy. Like the energy can transfer somewhere else instead. And that's something that's beautiful about working with your chart is then directing your energy. I also want you to remember that energy never dies. That's true in astrology and that's true in life. Energy can't be created or destroyed. It only changes form. So if you are constantly suppressing your anger, that energy doesn't disappear. It becomes anxiety, it becomes burnout, it becomes resentment. And the same thing happens inside of a birth chart. The aspects show us where the energy wants to move. And when we understand that energy instead of resisting it, it becomes wisdom, it becomes power, and we don't suffer because of our aspects anymore. We take power over them. It does not have power over us anymore. And that power lies in just one small switch, and that is just learning how to read your own energy, having the language to even shift your mind. That's what's beautiful about astrology. There are 5 major aspects that, as a beginner, everyone should know. And these aspects are strong and more noticeable throughout your life. And then there are minor aspects. And those minor aspects add like extra layers and detail, but they might not be felt as strongly or noticed as much. Now, in this course, we're going to focus on just the 5 major aspects that every beginner should know, because right now we're just learning the foundations of reading our chart and getting into astrology and learning to work with our own energy. Now, the 5 major aspects, to briefly introduce them, would be the conjunction, sextile, square, trine, and opposition. These will be the 5 major aspects that we are learning about today. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So first we have the conjunction. Now the conjunction happens when 2 planets are sitting right next to each other in the sky. And now if we have 2 or more planets in conjunction, that's how we're getting stelliums, okay? Now, because the planets are so close together, their energy blends. So they're not acting like 2 separate planets, 2 separate people in our movie having a conversation. No, they become one voice. It's like mixing yellow and blue paint together. Like once it's mixed, you can't separate them and turn them back into yellow and blue. Like it's green now. That's how the conjunction works. Like the planets merge together and begin expressing themselves as one combined energy. The best movie example I could think of a conjunction kind of relationship is Harry Potter and Voldemort. Okay, they're inseparable. Harry Potter and Voldemort are literally connected. Like they influence each other's lives constantly. Neither one of them can escape the other. That's like what a conjunction is. The 2 planets become fused together. Sometimes conjunctions are working beautifully together, and then sometimes they're overwhelming each other because there's no separation between them. Okay, you can kind of think of it like if you're sharing a tiny apartment with someone. If you're compatible, great. But if you're very different, you'll kind of have to learn how to cooperate because neither of you is leaving that apartment. So example, like, I think a really chill, easy conjunction is like Moon Venus. They tend to like be an easy pairing in their little house, you know what I mean? 2 characters that do well in their tiny apartment. A more difficult conjunction would be like Saturn and Jupiter because they're 2 opposite forces. So it might be like they might have a little bit more of a hard time combining their energies in this house, combining their energies living together as roommates in this tiny apartment. Now, a conjunction, that means 0 degrees apart or up to 10. Some astrologers could argue that 10 is too wide of an orb to be considered a conjunction. Some astrologers, I've heard people say like a conjunction shouldn't be more than 2 degrees. It really just depends on what you're studying, what kind of reading you're doing, I feel. Okay, so now let's talk about a sextile. So a sextile is a stimulating energy. Okay, it means that there is a positive and cooperative conversation happening between two planets. Like they are stimulating each other. They're bringing something out in each other. They're working together. They support each other. They activate each other's potential. So this is different than a trine. A trine is more effortless. A sextile requires participation from both of those planets. And an opportunity exists here, but you have to like engage with it. You have to be active in it. So our movie metaphor would be Hermione and Harry Potter. Their dynamic reminds me of a sextile. Hermione constantly gives Harry opportunities to succeed because she offers ideas, solutions, guidance. And Harry has to participate, right? Because he has to choose, will he listen or will he not? Is he going to work with this or are they not? But either way, they work well together because Harry also gives Hermione opportunities too. So that's a sextile. There's a beautiful supportive energy there, but it needs to be used. It requires action. Now let's get into a square. So a square is friction, it's tension. Something about it is triggering, but it leads to development. Like the two energies working together, it leads to development. So the planets in a square are often trying to achieve a similar goal, but they disagree on how to get there. Okay, so in this chart, we see like Saturn in Aries is squaring this Venus in Capricorn. They're both cardinal signs, so squares will happen in that same modality. So they're both cardinal signs, so they have that similar goal of like, I want to start something up. But they disagree on how to get there. Saturn in Aries might want to be a little bit more impulsive with it, where or like it'll be more fearful of it, whereas like Venus and Capricorn really wants to be practical, strategic, and patient with it. Saturn and Aries might be more impulsive. You see how it's like they both have that goal of starting up, but the way they go about it is different. Neither, and it feels kind of like neither side wants to fully cooperate, and that's a frustrating part. And inside in your psyche, that feels like internal pressure. However, squares are often some of the greatest sources of growth. They kind of force you to develop new situations and to find ways to achieve that same mission anyway, to use the strengths of both of these energies to achieve that mission. So, a great example of this would be Harry Potter and Draco. These two are constantly rubbing each other the wrong way, and that creates friction. Neither one lets the other stay comfortable either. Like when they're both on screen, they're on lookout. You know what I mean? They're like, I see you. Like, I know this is my op. That's how that square works. But they both grow through each other. Don't you notice? They both grow through that tension. Without Draco, Harry wouldn't become the same person he needed to become. Without Harry, neither would Draco. So without that friction, there is no fire. Without that friction, there is no growth. Now, let's get into a trine. So we can see a trine right here between Pluto and Saturn and Aries. So a trine is an energy of flow, enhancement, natural talent. They're in the same like element. See, like they're Pluto's in a fire sign, and Saturn is also in a fire sign. And trines are easy flowing. Trines, by the way, are at 120 degrees. And then squares are at 90 degrees, and sextiles are at 60. Just wanting to make sure we cover the degrees. Anyway, trines mean that the planets, they might have, a little bit of different agendas, right? Because Sagittarius is a mutable sign, and Aries is a cardinal sign. So they might have different agendas, But those agendas complement each other because they both want to do it in a fiery way. All right, so they're like, okay, cool, we move the same. That's like that energy of the trine. Something about you and that other person or these planets, it's moving the same. It's moving effortlessly. Now, the challenge with trines is that they can become so natural that we stop noticing them. So trines can represent our talents, our gifts, areas in life where we are always receiving support, like support is readily available. So the best example of a movie dynamic that I could think of that represents a trine would be Harry and Ron. You can see that their friendship flows naturally. They understand each other, they support each other, they hype each other up. They're very similar in a lot of ways. And their energy just moves effortlessly. But we've also seen them take each other for granted and fight over stupid things. And so that could be that energy of the trine. Like just because something's natural doesn't mean you should take it for granted. That's sort of the lesson there. The main difference too between a trine and a sextile, because that distinction is often missed, is that a trine is primarily harmonizing energy. The planets are harmonizing, whereas a sextile is more stimulating energy. The planets are encouraging each other to take action. Now let's talk about opposition. This is a 180-degree difference. It means these planets are 180 degrees away from each other. Now, an opposition is about polarity, contrast, interdependence, balance. Oppositions are a little more dramatic, more loud and felt than squares, I would say. Instead of there being friction, there is straight up polarization here. The planets stand on opposite sides of the chart. They have very different agendas. They have very different priorities, different perspectives. So it can feel like a tug of war. Yet oppositions still contain a lesson, and that is that neither side possesses the complete truth. Each represents one half of a greater whole. They're two sides of the same coin. So it's not about choosing one side, it's about integration. Okay, you need to discover what each planet needs to complete their mission. It's like two rivals who discover they need the other person to complete their mission. That's like what an opposition is. So an example of this in a movie would be Harry Potter and Snape. Like the relationship is complicated. Harry and Snape seem like different people, complete opposite people. And for most of the story, they don't understand each other. Yet they are two sides of the same coin. They both are teaching each other something really important. But at the end of the day, they kind of needed each other to complete the mission. And they kind of had to find balance in their dynamic and respect for the other person. And through each other, they got the full picture. They see the full story. One has what the other doesn't quite have, so together they're stronger. Now, the difference between a square and an opposition, because that is also a distinction people can confuse. With the square, the energies want similar things, but they just keep irritating each other. So there's causing friction, it's triggering, there's pressure. But with an opposition, the energy wants completely different things, but they keep butting heads, but they have to come together eventually for the mission because the other energy has what the other doesn't have, if that makes sense. So there's a polarization, there's a contrast, there's an energy mismatch. Now, I don't think I made a slide for it, but because somebody asked me earlier this week about out of bounds planets, I want to throw that in here. So an out of bounds planets, if you've heard this in astrology, it's not an aspect. It's more of like a condition of the planet. And an out of bounds planet travels beyond its normal path of the sun. So symbolically, it operates outside of conventional expectations of that planet. So it's not always going to follow the usual rules of astrology. And it may express itself in an unusual, amplified, extreme way. A good example I can think of an out of bounds energy like character would be Luna Lovegood. I think that's a good analogy. Luna doesn't think like everyone else. She sees the world completely different, she isn't concerned with fitting in either. So out of balance planets are like this. They don't care about the conventional expectations. They have their own logic, gifts, and challenges. And so to have an out of balance planet in your personal chart, that means there's this part of you that is a little outside of the norm. So, at the highest level, right, aspects are not about describing your problems. It's about describing relationships between planets. It's about describing the conversations in your mind so that way we can start to integrate it. So that way we can kind of tone down that internal war and find some peace within ourselves. The studying aspects is key to healing if you're trying to feel more whole within yourself, if you're trying to feel more harmonious within yourself and your mind and your spirit and your body and your emotions. Work with your aspects. If you guys have any questions on any of the lessons, please comment that down below. Or if you're enjoying this, comment that down below and let me know what you think. Comments really helps me grow as a creator, and it definitely keeps me inspired to keep creating on YouTube. And then if you aren't already subscribed to my Substack, sign up for that because that is how I notify everyone when a new lesson drops or if new horoscopes drop. I'm not going to spam you with a bunch of emails. I'm just going to let you know when there's something new. Yeah, and my homework for you, if you care to have homework, would be to, write something down about your chart in the comments. Write something down about an aspect you have or a planet that you have, a placement that you have, whatever. Just write it down in the comments and try to interpret it. And maybe in the comments, we can help each other out. And we can start to practice a little bit before we get into our demo reading in the next lesson. Thanks for watching. I will talk to you guys later. Bye.